Hello, everybody, and welcome to the channel Yankees Outdoor Adventures. I am Mahalo and Speculino. To you can call me Yankee, and tonight I got a great show for you. I have the story, the whole story, and nothing but the whole story of Albert Ostman. I was kidnapped by a Bigfoot. So I dropped a short video. It was kind of really popular, although a lot of the comments brought up some strange questions that really piqued my interest. So I dove into researching about Mr. Ostman and his adventure, and I got a lot of details. I not only got the detailed details, but I even got the unofficial off the record details, because he actually had a lot more to say to the news reporter than they were willing to print, although both copies are on file at the British Columbia Hall of Records. Still has copies, and you can get them yourself and read the whole thing yourself. So I was able to find the behind the behind the scenes, or the statements that were made that the newspaper didn't really feel fit their narrative. They didn't want it in the paper, but I think they're cool, and I will be adding them here today. So, all right, let's get into this. But to get into it, we got to start, of course, with the who. And who? Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I got it. I'm supposed to start right here. Who is Albert Ostman? All right, guys. Now, Albert Ostman was a first-generation Swedish immigrant born in Sweden. And at the age of 20, which was 1913, at the age of 20, he went overseas in search of a better life. Okay, so he was born in Sweden, real small town in Sweden, by the way, real boondockish country type area he grew up in. And at the age of 20, he left there. He came to Canada. We know all this, though, as a fact, because there's actually government documents of all this, because by the age of 30, he was a resident at Bowser in British Columbia, which is a real small town. 1924, he called himself a prospector, a lumber worker, and a construction worker. He also called himself a grader. Now, that's because he was doing grading work in the United States. This is how we know all this about him, because he filled out papers for the U.S. Department of Labor. In 1924, he told the U.S. Department of Labor that he was a grading contractor. He filled out forms claiming he was immigrating to the United States permanently to work and live in Washington State. Although in 1975, when he died at the age of 82, he was still a Canadian citizen. Another thing I just found, and I just threw it on here, I thought it was interesting. He did fill out a draft registration for the United States, and he noted in the registration that he did not want to fight overseas, which I don't know. I thought that was interesting. He didn't want to go home. You guys know him best for the Canadian prospector who was reported that he was abducted by Sasquatch and held captive for 6 days. He stated the event took place near Toba, if I'm saying that correctly, the Toba Inlet in British Columbia in 1924. Now, like I said, you could still get the actual news article. It's still online. This is just a certified letter stating that they took his statement and that he was of sound mind and body at the time. There are actually a lot of cool old documents on this story that you can research. So it's I invite anyone to add in and do the same. But okay, so that's who Albert was. Now, he did work in the United States, and we're going to get into the story. He did work in the United States for a little bit, at least from what you could tell in records, he did for at least 2 years. And when he was abducted, he was on what he considered a vacation. And actually, I shouldn't even open this. I should open this one because I thought this was just kind of really cool to show you guys, because he was going on vacation. This is 1924. And what do you do to go on vacation? Well, you go prospecting in the backwoods of nowhere. And that's exactly what he did. Now, what I have here to share with you picture-wise is just some really fascinating things of what it was like when people went off backpacking back in the 20s. Nowadays, we think so much about, pack light and all this type of stuff. Look at the size of the bag on that dude's back. And this is all really important because Ostman carried what he claimed was 80 pounds of gear on his back. But it's really important to note that when you went camping back then, it was all off trail. There wasn't all kinds of ultralight gear. And if you needed it, you brought it. That's the old school thinking of like, what do you got in your backpack? I got what I need. It's never how much does it weigh? It's, do you need it? Then you bring it. Ostman noted that he had 80 plus pounds, but he also noted that he didn't get to travel far between resting, because when you packed like that, like these guys and gals, look at that girl in the middle. Look at the size of her bag. But when you backpacked like that, you didn't go 10 miles in a jaunt. You went until you were tired, and then you sat down, and then you went a little further. And that's what he noted that he did on his journey. That he noted it. The young lady's backpack there. I love it. And I love this gentleman sitting here in front of his camping setup. To me, looking like he's in his Sunday best, Nowadays, we all got to get those, the Carhartts and all the special camping clothes that go with our camping gear. And check out dude there, man, It was a different life. So Albert had decided to go on vacation, and he went to he went up to Canada to do this. Okay, so where am I? Right here. We're going to get into the story. There's also, before I say all this, there's also a full list of, I'm going to discuss some of the things that he had with him. And again, the short video didn't give you guys nearly enough details, because do you know, in his sleeping bag with him while he was being carried off, he not only had a knife, but he had his gun. But we're gonna get into that. Like I said, there's a lot of details of the story that weren't shared earlier. So, he also online. There is an entire manifest list. When Albert was asked to do the interview, he went through his old gear, and he literally found his grocery list and his checklist for the trip. So he actually had that for the reporter. So there is a whole entire breakdown list. I'm only going to focus on the things that were important in the story. But if you'd like to know exactly what he carried with him, you can find that out online. Now, he again, on his vacation, he made his way to London, British Columbia. Lund. I know I said all that wrong, guys. So anyone from the area, please feel free to correct me. Where he hired an Indian guide. Now, he hired an Indian guide in this area. And also, Lund, if you guys, this was it, I do believe. Was that? No, it wasn't it. It was the map on the picture. Lund. If you guys go to look at that today, it's up in the top corner, but if you look it up on your Google Maps today, it's still like nowhere out there, all the way through there. I mean, there's a lot of no man's land out there yet today. But he hired an Indian guide. Now, he hired an Indian guide who was known to be a storyteller. Now, that may be a good thing or a bad thing, but this was a known thing of him. He was a storyteller, and Albert had noted that he was fascinated with a particular tale of a drunken man. That was low, of a drunken man who was a gold prospector, and once a week he would come down out of the mountain with a bag of gold. And he would drink all weekend long until he couldn't, barely walk, and he'd crawl back up into the mountains. And the following week, he'd do it again. And he did this all the time. And Albert asked, well, what happened? He said, well, then he stopped. One day he crawled up into the mountains and he never came back down. And that's when the Indian guide told him that he believed a Sasquatch had gotten him. Now, according to Albert, this was the very first time in his life he had ever heard of a Sasquatch. That he's never heard of one before, that he had no idea what it was. Was it a special word for a regular ant? He didn't know. And he asked the chief chief, but he asked the guide to explain it. And he explained it as a tall, strong, hairy, human people that live in the mountains. Now, he didn't call them monsters, or he didn't call, and that's the way it was written for according to Albert. It wasn't a monster. These were large, hair-covered people that lived in the mountains. Now, Albert, he didn't believe the story, okay, and he thought, and this is a quote from Albert. Albert said, maybe long ago, but not in the modern days of 1920s. It was the 1920s, but Albert did not think that in the modern days of 1920 such a thing could exist. But he also noted that he paid special attention to the guide because, when you go off into the wilderness like that, it pays to listen to your elders that have done it before. And he's claimed that he had gotten a lot of helpful information. Now, he never says he was really looking for gold, but the area he winds up in is the area where the supposed miner would disappear and come back with gold all the time. Okay. And also another point, because I personally believe he was just on a gold expedition, but he doesn't, and almost like he takes pains not to say that in his story, that he's brought some prospecting gear, but he brought all the prospecting gear you would bring for that. I mean, he had the hatchet, he had the pans. He was prospecting. That's what he was doing. He was looking for lost gold. He was following legends. He hiked with the guide for a day or so. Okay. Then he broke from the guide. He began to go deeper and on his own, and would hike a day, set up camp, sleep the night, break down, go again. This is what he decided to do for the next 3 days. Okay. Now, he noticed that he had on the near the end, before he got to his main camp setup, he felt uneasy. I mentioned that he felt uneasy a few different times, but not out of the ordinary because, of where he was. There was a lot of wildlife, that type of thing. He set up on his fourth night. He set up his camp in a place that he decided he was going to stay for a week. He He mentioned earlier on he would set up camps just before nightfall, or a few hours before nightfall rather, so he had time to prospect nearby. This camp he was setting up so that he could wander off and prospect around the camp. He was making it like his base camp. And once again, in Albert's words, he set up one classy camp because he had all kinds of gear and he was proud of what he had. And I think if anybody here who camps, and when you find that perfect camp spot and you set up your camp just right the way you want it, you know that aha moment you feel, that yeah, you know. And that's what he projected, that he was really satisfied with the camp he had set up, the location he found. He went into detail about how nearby the water source was and how flat and level the area he was able to set up. Well, you know, he real adamant about how beautiful this spot was. Well, he started having trouble right away on the first night here with something getting into his stuff. Now, it's obvious, like I do when I base camp, he probably wasn't being super duper neat with everything. If you're not worried about, he had his bags, like the things that he thought big animals, bears, would get into, he had tied up on he claimed up on a pole, but I'm imagining he meant up on a tree branch because of where he was, but it did state up on a pole. But he noticed it was getting into stuff. He would wake up in the morning and things would be rustled around and moved. Now, the first night that this happened, it bothered him, and he figured that it was the porkies. And I had to say it that way because that's the way you read it. Back then, Porcupine's nickname was a porky. I didn't know it. Maybe you knew it. I don't know, but I didn't know it. So I had to find out what porkies were, because he was real adamant that it was the porkies, and the porkies were getting into his stuff. He even made a comment that by the second night he was so frustrated he was ready to make some porky stew. So he was getting ready to put a stop to the porcupines. Now, he mentions one night taking his gun and laying it next to the sleeping bag, putting his shoes down in the sleeping bag because porkies love leather. Hey, go figure. And this way he was going to wait, and and he was going to have some porky stew. Well, he fell asleep. And he openly admits that he's an extremely heavy sleeper, and it's extremely exerting being out the way he was. And when he lays down, he crashes, he goes to sleep. So he fell asleep. He was going to get some porky stew, but didn't work out that way. Well, this time when he wakes up in the morning, things really changed. His pack that was up in the pole, I'm sorry, but that's his words, not mine. The pack was still there, but it was turned upside down, and everything that was in it was all over the ground. He noticed he had some prunes missing. I know prunes, but hey, listen, this is 1920s. Prunes was excellent food to take with you on a backpack trip. But he had some prunes missing. He had other things just really scattered about. But he noticed one thing that was odd to him. He noticed that he had a bag of salt, and it wasn't touched at all. Now, to him, this is why this stuck out and why he noted it in the story. To him, the bag of salt would have been the first thing the porkies would have got. But they didn't get the bag of salt at all. They left it alone. And how in the heck did they turn his bag upside down and leave it hanging up there, right? These are the things going through his mind. He says, all right, tonight I'm going to get it. So it looked like rain. So what he did was he took that gun this time and put it down in the sleeping bag with him. He also took his boots and put them down at the bottom of the sleeping bag with his knife. He was ready. Okay, now again, this is a short. Don't tell you this. This is what he had in his backpack, right, in his bag, and he's getting ready to go to sleep, and he's all like, he's gonna do it. He's gonna do it this time. He's gonna stay awake, but he didn't stay awake. He crashed. Okay, and when he crashed, that's when stuff happened. He woke up, as he says, in a complete daze. He didn't even know where he was. He said he had to try to figure it out, and it took a moment before he was like, oh yeah, I'm on vacation and now I'm stuck in a bag. The Bigfoot, supposed Sasquatch, had picked him up, sleeping bag and all, and began to drag him off into the wilderness. Now, he couldn't see. He was down in the bag. He had it with him in the bag his gun, his knife, and his boots. Not only that, he mentioned that as he was being drugged, he could hear the jingling of his backpack gear, and he said that he knew right away that they were dragging his backpack and stuff too, right? So like, it wasn't just dragging him, it was dragging all his gear. And he was in that bag with his gun and his knife, okay? You got to paint that picture for you guys. He did not know what had him. In fact, he said he thought at one point it might have been that somebody threw him up over a horse, because he felt like he was kind of on a horse being bounced. But he said at other times he was dropped down to the ground and being outright drugged. And he had no idea. And at this point is when he mentioned the very first time about using the gun. And he mentioned that he was afraid to just pop off shots. He didn't want to go to jail for murder. Okay, now that's his statement. In his mind, he's in this bag, but he don't know what's going on. He don't want to just pop off shots. But that wasn't the only problem, because he also had a whole nother situation going on. Now, you remember me telling you the boots and the knife and the guns all in the bag. He said he could get his hand on the gun, but because he was in a bag that was being pulled and he was being hung in it, he really couldn't maneuver it. He also said that because of the way it scooped him up, he didn't get a chance to like straighten out his legs and stuff first. He said he dropped like a ball to the bottom of the bag. So he had his shoes, which were cleated, and we can talk more about that in a minute, but he had his cleated shoes and his knife under his legs, and his feet were like twisted up behind his back. And this is the way he stayed for about 3 hours. Now, he did actually have a wristwatch with him, and he does claim he knows it was 3 hours. He felt he was taking nearly, he felt he was taking nearly 25 miles in 3 hours. Now, I don't know, that's a pretty big stretch, but that was his opinion. He was a seasoned outdoorsman. Maybe that did happen. So while he was being drugged, he also mentioned that it made a noise. Now, whatever was dragging him coughed. And he said when it coughed, that was the very first time he thought about that story he was told about the Sasquatch. But he still didn't see it, and he didn't know what it was, okay? Now, the Sasquatch, it comes, takes him off 3 hours, and then finally it drops him. And when he drops to the ground inside the bag rolls down a hill. And he takes off rolling down this hill and finally comes to a stop. And Now, like I said, guys, he can't even stand up. 3 hours. Imagine what it would have been like with them cleats and your legs bent backwards, and what probably the gun jamming you really in your side or something, I'm sure. Bouncing over rocks, being hung up, and 3 hours. He couldn't even stand up. He still couldn't get his head poked out of the bag once he come to a stop. But he hollered out because he heard some whispering. Now, that was kind of maybe a key factor for a lot of Bigfoot people, is he heard whispering back and forth. Once he came to a stop of rolling, that was the first thing he could hear. It was whispering. So he hollered, "Well, you fellas walk with me." Right? And the whispering stopped. Nobody answered. So he crawled out of the bag. And again, remember, unable, he's hurting right now, okay? And in the moonlight, or sunlight, sorry, the sun's just coming up now. All right, this happened. We figured 3 hours drug through the woods, now sun coming up, twilight, probably 4 or 5 a.m., 3, 2, 1 a.m. he was abducted maybe, and it's now 4:30, 5 a.m. in the morning. The sun's coming up, and lo and behold, what does he see? I know these are the bears. He sees silhouettes. He sees these silhouettes of a Bigfoot family, what he called 4 silhouettes: a mother, a father, and 2 children. Now, he described all these very well. In fact, he described them so well, this is a portion where we could get into some of the behind the scenes things that Albert said, because like I said, there was a whole list of notes that the newspaper didn't feel were appropriate for the newspaper, but Albert seemed to think the old man, which is what he called the biggest and the oldest one, he seemed to think the old man, although he was very large, very hairy, seemed to think he had a really small personality, manhood, let's say. So he kind of went on about that they left out of the paper. Another thing Albert went on about that they mentioned a little bit of, but not in as much detail as Albert did, was the looks of the female. Now, he said the female was extremely hippie, and that if you would have put one of them fancy uplifting girdles, that's what he called it, on her, she would have looked good. Okay, now that was his opinion of her. She was hippie, and she kind of had a little waddle to her walk, and if you would have lifted her up a little bit, she would have been kind of good looking. He also went into detail about the young boy who was about 7 foot tall. The male, the old man, which he called, was about 9 foot tall. The mom, the old lady is what he called her, was again about 7 foot tall. The young male was about 7 foot tall. And he talked a lot about the young male. And he described the young male almost like gorilla-like, not in what I mean in like he looked like a gorilla, in the hair. He described the hair being everywhere except around the eyes and the nose. You know how a gorilla face is? That's how he described the hair on the young male. He also described the feet in detail. And they also edited out a part about the jumping. They claimed on the behind the scenes, they claimed the young male could jump, Albert claimed the young male could jump 20 feet. That's a jump, y'all. But he claimed that he would rock on his butt and hold his feet up in the air and then fling himself and jump 20 feet. I don't even know how, but this was part of the behind the scenes. But he described the feet as being padded, almost dog-like feet. Which, I mean, that's not that could be a normal human's feet if they never wear shoes. I'm just saying, but that's how he described the feet. Uh, so Albert lived with the Bigfoot 6 days. This is what he told. This is the tale that that Albert told, that he lived with the Bigfoot for 6 days, and he did. Here's what he did. Let me tell you what he did. So the Bigfoot, when they dropped him, I'll get back to that, and he come out wondering who them fellers were and what them fellers wanted. He realized that they were something different. They weren't normal. That these had to be the Sasquatches, and he didn't want to quarrel with them, which I would probably for good reason. And he had all his gear. So he decided he would just set up his camp. Now, one of the strange parts of the story to me, and you can take it however you guys would, but if you're a Bigfoot enthusiast, this is a strange part of the story to me, because he sets up his camp, all right, and Albert, love him. I love him, because the first thing he needs is like a pot of coffee, right? And he's got his backpack, he's got his gear. So he makes a fire and brews some coffee. Now, Albert tells us that the Sasquatch interacted with him. He would give them little gifts, empty cans, food containers, things like that. He said that he never seen the Sasquatches eat meat while he was there, or cook while he was there. But he never mentioned any type of reaction from the Sasquatch over his fire. And we should probably get back to the story, save that for after talk in the show, but just to me personally, it would have either A, never seen fire and been scared of it, or B, knew what fire was and would have been interested in how he started his. Because most likely he used a lighter or a ferro rod or something of the time, right? Probably a Zippo, to be honest, is probably what he used. So, that part's odd to me. It's odd to me. But anyway, let's overlook all that. So Albert lives with the Sasquatches. He claims that they weave blankets out of I believe it was a thin birch wood with moss in between that made a cushion. He also claimed that they would bring him food because he would give them little things, and they would bring him food of these sweet roots that grew up on the canyon wall. Now, this is an important thing, because I told you that he dropped and he rolled in, right, when the Bigfoot dropped him. But what he rolled into was a large ravine. There was only one way in and one way out. I mean, it's like Butch Cassidy stuff here, right? But there's only one way in, one way out. And the Bigfoot family was standing there at the way in and out, okay? Now, Albert went into good detail about this ravine. He said it was a big flat, that there was water. He set up camp away from the entrance, away from the Sasquatches, and closer to the water source. And he set his camp up, and they would interact with him. He had, like I said, had his gear with him. By this point in his trip, he was down to 4 cans of snuff, which also comes up really important, because early in the story he mentions, and this is the second time he mentions what I brought up earlier, and he mentions that he thought for a moment that if he could get the old man to eat a can of snuff, it would kill him, and they couldn't pin him for murder because it wouldn't be his fault if the guy ate it. Now that's the way he stated it, right? It wouldn't if the guy ate it. So it's interesting also that although he refers to them as Sasquatch, he sees them as people like he does. He does mention while he was there that the female was very angry about him being there and that they would communicate to each other. And he could tell by the way they communicated that the female was angry. We did mention the young girl. The young girl don't get talked about a whole lot, and we'll get into the behind the scenes stuff about that too here in a minute. Yeah, 'cause that's a little strange altogether too. So, he's camping in this big flat. He mentions that hey, I was thinking maybe I would poison him and that way I wouldn't go to jail for murder. But then he kind of forgets that. He does have his rifle. He does have his gun. He was asked, why didn't you think of shooting? And again, his reply was, well, it wasn't armed. I didn't want to go to jail for murder. So there was 3 different occasions he mentioned murder and going to jail. So I think that's a really interesting part for the story too, that to help you with his viewpoint of apparently he wasn't, in his opinion, wasn't seeing animals, or he wouldn't have thought that way, right? He was a hunter and a trapper and stuff too. So he's in this ravine. He's camping out. The young Bigfoot are interacting with him. And he decides, well, you know what? Enough's enough. I got to go. So he packs up his stuff and he heads for the opening. And the big Bigfoot, the old man, jumps down to the trail, the only way out, and says, "Suga, suga." Sorry about that. I don't know if that's how it sounded, but that's what he said. He said, "Suga, suga," and put his hand out to stop. And Albert didn't want to argue with the man. I mean, again, he was 9 foot tall. He was a big old boy. I don't think I'd argue with him. Suka, suka, okay, bro. And that's what Albert said too. So Albert just kind of like he pointed that he needed to go. Old man just gave him another suka, suka, and he went back and set his camp back up again and waited again. Now this time he's now plotting because he's got to get out of here. He's running low on supplies. He's been here 6 days, so he says he decided to make a plan, and he waited till the morning, and he got his gear together, and he brewed a pot of coffee. Now this is the great escape, guys. Let me see, where am I at? He got everything together. He brewed a pot of coffee, and he decided to sit and make a really big deal out of how good his coffee was today, and it's the best coffee I've ever had. And he got the attention of the young Bigfoot. Well, that was his plan. However, he made such a commotion, the old man come over. Which, okay, that's the one he's got to get anyway. So as the old man come over to see what he was making such a big deal about, he pulled out his snuff. Maybe I should explain for those of you that don't know what snuff is, because there's several stories that were written after this that are written like they took place in the same time era. I can't think of the titles of them all, and I'm not even going to try. But I do know one of the stories mentions snuff as in stuff they snorted back in the day, and that's not what we mean here. When he says snuff, he's talking about that skull baby. It was the Copenhagen, that type of stuff is what he was chewing or using. How they would normally use it, for those of you that don't know, I'm sure many of you do, but he would take a pinch of it, put it between your cheek and gum, and you'd spit the tobacco juice. Anyway, he opened a new can, and as the old man come over, he took a pinch, and he let the old man smell it. But when the old man reached for it, he pulled it back like this. Now, maybe he said he pulled back like as if the old man was gonna hog it all. And I think, what he was doing was trying to make it more appealing to the old man. So the old man grabbed it from his hand. Now at this point in the story, Albert must have forgot what he was doing. And I don't know, because now Albert says, and again, this is from the story, that the old man took that whole container, and the first thing I thought was, I hope he don't eat it and kill himself. Oh, all right, Albert. But anyway, that's second little inconsistency. But hey, we're not going to tear Albert apart. This was a hell of an ordeal. So it took it out of his hand, and he said before he could do anything, Bigfoot just dumped it right down his gullet and swallowed. And then he even started licking the can. Albert said he reared back and looked at him, and all at once, he said Sasquatch's eyes got as big as dollars, right? And I bet they did. And at that moment, Sasquatch grabbed the pot of coffee, and he dumped it down his gullet, grounds and all. That surely couldn't have helped the situation any, but when he did that, he let out a scream, and he started literally doing somersaults and rolls like he was flipping out. Albert was like, dude's flipping, I'm out of here. He grabs up his stuff, making sure his gun is ready, because he said, man, if Bigfoot's, I guess he got over to murder at this point, because he said if that Sasquatch comes after me, I'm going to have to shoot him. So he grabbed up his gun and he darted for that door, for that way out. Now he looked back for a moment to see if the old man was coming to get him, but the old man was so sick that he just took off in the other direction down to the spring to drink some water. I'd imagine he's feeling pretty rough. So Albert darted. He run, Albert run. But right when he gets to the exit, Mama jumps out, right? She's coming. She didn't jump right out on him, but she's coming. So he takes his gun and he shoots at the rocks right in front of him. Now, apparently she ain't never seen nothing like this before. So he shoots at the rocks. She flips out and runs the other way, scared of that gun. And the two youngins run to her, and they all huddle up together. Old man, he's down drinking. Albert is out the door. But he don't know where he is. He has no idea where he is. He isn't where he set up camp at. He was drugged in a sleeping bag for 25 miles, and he's lost. So what can he do? Well, he does what any good hiker would do. He searches the high grounds as fast as he can, only resting on the high grounds so that he can keep an eye on his surroundings and getting his bearings from the high ground so he can tell his direction. Now, according to Albert, 6 days with the Bigfoot, another 2 nights lost once he escaped the Sasquatches. Then he wandered into a logging camp. And when he wandered into the logging camp, the ordeal was pretty much over at that point. He got rescued. They told him where he was at. He was able to find his way out. And if anyone has any questions or anything of the sort, I know there's a few things I didn't share on the behind the scenes, which I would love to talk with you more about. So I am going to get up and look at the chat on the camera. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you, everybody, and stay for the after show, and let's talk about it. So, all right, here we go. All right. Are we doing a poll? Is it true or false? I'd love to hear that. Yeah. Let me see. What am I going to do here with the camera? I need to get it closer to me. Closer. Get closer. All right. If I go, ooh, that's not going to work. So, does anyone have any particular questions as I'm trying to get this camera to go the other direction? Uh-oh. Can I do it? Yeah, that'll work. Yes, that will work. So, how do I do this? Boom. All right, guys. Sorry, the screen's now backwards to you guys, but now I can see you guys. So, and we'll lower you down here. And if anyone has any questions at all, like I said, there was a lot of things to talk about. You can't confuse the actual story with some of the fiction stories that were written after it, and there's a few of them. What's his name? Mr. Green, something Green. I can't remember his name. Is the man who took the article, wrote the article, also wrote a book. In his book, he put some insinuations that, I think were open to interpretation. So whether or not they were actual and happened, I don't know. But there was some insinuation in the book, not in the story, but in the book, there was some insinuation that the female, that he was brought there as a gift for the young female. Now he didn't say that in the story, but on the off the record stuff from the story, he did say some, just, I don't know, I thought was out of the weird that he mentioned. He went into detail about the looks of the young female, that she was, flat chested. And I don't even know if it's appropriate to say all of it here, to be honest with you, because he went into some heavy details and he didn't think she was very attractive. And that was on all the off the records. And then when the dude wrote the book, he added that he was brought there as a gift for the young girl. So I don't know if that's, that's part of the rumor that came out of the story. So I don't know if that's true or not. John Green. Yeah, John Green. Thank you, Nate. Thank you, brother. Okay. But I would love to hear anybody's opinion on the story if you got any questions. He also, but he did also go in detail. And this is why I thought it was strange how deep detailed he went on the females. But maybe it's not so strange when you realize he went into the same graphic detail on the males. Okay, because they didn't wear clothes. So, and apparently you could see everything. That's adjacent lore for sure, right? Like I said in the original article, there's side notes that were not used in the article, but they were taken at the time of the article, and that's where they mention all the anatomy stuff, because he really talked a lot about the anatomy. I mean, like I said, I don't even know how I could say it all here, because he didn't just talk about, he talked about he talked about everything that you were told in school not to talk about in public. So I think maybe that could be misconstrued, though, to say, oh, well, he was talking about their this and their that. He must have been there for that reason, but I don't know. Like I said, that's like a side lore. Albert's account seems legit for me, especially Would you talk of here? Yeah. No, it's dude. I tell you what, it was a really interesting trip that he went on. I'm going to tell you that much. Hey, Food Forest, welcome. I think he said it. Let me being captive is crying or all of the above, right? Uh, I did think the fire bit I thought was a little odd. Um, when I first heard the sleeping bag thing, let's start there real quick. I'll give you my view on this, and then we'll wrap it up. Uh, when I first heard the sleeping bag thing, I was like, what's the big deal? Why didn't he get out? So I pictured him with nothing. Then I heard or read, he had a knife, he had a gun, and I'm like, well, what in the heck, But I think I had a realization in his story when he explained how injured he was when he arrived. And because he went into detail about his legs being cramped the way they were and his cleats being stuck into his skin. And all of a sudden, I could see not being able to do crap if you were in that position. He was kind of, excuse the French, screwed and tattooed. There wasn't much you could do. So when I heard the details of that, I it kind of helped me understand a little more. The ook the Shuka, whatever the Bigfoot man, the old man, sorry, had to say to him, doesn't really sound exactly like what you normally hear about Bigfoot sounds, but it doesn't mean that doesn't dismiss anything. Inconsistencies in the story, weird things about that, like the little inconsistencies in the story would be mainly with him talking about murder and whatnot, because he kind of like he bounces back and forth. Like, I want to give him the stuff to kill himself, and now I'm afraid if he eats it he'll die. And I don't know, that little bit was the only thing. But like I said in the show, cut Albert some slack. If you had that happen to you, that's not a big inconsistency in your story. Yeah, so guys, that's pretty much it. I do believe I covered everything. Like I said, if anybody had any questions or anything, it would probably rattle some more stuff in my brain. Peace and love, fellow Earthlings. A man camping alone in the wilds already has. Oh yeah, no. Well, see, that's he wasn't. He was prepared. I mean, that's one thing we talked about. And where do I got it at? The pet, the peeps. People of that time era were they were a different breed, guys. It's not the same. It wasn't the same to them as it is to us. When we look for, the lightest gear and all this type of stuff, these guys had what you had, and you took what you needed, and that was it. Albert was 80-pound sack, so I mean, good Lord. I love the lady backpackers here too, man. It's like don't think it's just modern girls that are tough. I mean, girls always been tough. That's how we made it this far as human beings, because we can endure. All right. Imagine being carried in a sack with tons of. I know, right? Not be able to grab it and use it efficiently. Yeah, it's well, he did mention. He never mentioned what caliper weapon he had. He had a rifle. But he did mention that he didn't think shooting it would do any good. He did make a mention that he didn't think shooting it would do any good because he was bigger than a bear. And I guess apparently he didn't think his gun could kill a bear. So I don't know what caliber he had. So, you know, I mean, that's the other thing, too. Around 30 years ago, I was in a ravine and heard some strange sounds from some type of creature. I don't know what it was. One of my siblings and another person heard it too. Sounds is not out of the ordinary, that's for sure. The thing is with sounds is, you know, we don't ever get to know, so we always got that big question mark in our head. Imagine if he had a smartphone back then and he was able to record it. Oh yeah, no doubt, no doubt. That would have been magical. But that type of magic only happened back then. It seems like it don't get to happen today. Guys, we have been in it for an hour. Actually, the first part will be edited out of this video because it was just set up. But I really appreciate everybody coming. And thank you all for all the recent subscribers and whatnot. I greatly appreciate it. To see everyone again, Cam Randy, definitely. I think that's pretty much it. I think we're gonna wrap it up right here. So let's go here. I'm gonna show you this before I go. So you gotta be a hardcore lover to make it all the way to the end. But this morning, I was about to freeze to death. It was 56 degrees. This is real. That's real life. That's me. You know, I'm hunkered on my coffee, and I know everybody thinks it's funny. They make fun of me, but it was 56 degrees this morning. I was about to freeze to death, y'all. All right, that's it. Keep your eyes open. Be vigilant. If you see Bigfoot, take a picture. Send it to me if it's a good one. If it's a blurry one, send it to me anyway. That's all we ever get. As always, until our trails meet again, I hope all your adventures are awesome, no matter what it is that gets you outdoor, guys. Get outdoors. Have an adventure. I appreciate each and every one of you. And with Nishita for watching. And that's it. We're gone. Thank you, Green Feather. Green Feather, oh my God. Everybody, I want to also give a big shout out to my brother Green Feather and ask you to be sure to show a little love, man, to others in the chat room and to our monitors here this evening. Good night, everybody.